Welcome to Riffing with the President. I'm Ken Elmore, the president at Dean College, and I, from time to time, am going to bring folks in here for conversation. I'm trying to get a lay of the land in Franklin and also at Dean College. My first guest is someone a lot of people probably know. Frank Falvey, he joins me, and I said, Frank, I need you to introduce me to Franklin, Massachusetts. He's someone who, although he hasn't been here forever, doesn't think he's a local. So, Frank, thanks for joining me.
It is such an honor.
Yeah, same.
To be your first guest, I don't feel worthy of it.
Oh, stop it. Well, let me ask you this, Frank. How does it feel being on the other side of this?
It feels really different.
Really? Talk to me. Well, first off, give people a sense. Those people who don't know you, talk to us a little bit about what you do around here, and then let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you are, and talk to me about Franklin.
Well, to begin with, I'm going to talk a lot about past things,
okay,
what I have done. Okay, you know, I'm a person that moved here in 1964 when it was pretty rural.
Okay.
Because I grew up in Boston, in the city of Boston.
Whereabouts?
Hyde Park Avenue, 300 Hyde Park, part of Jamaica Plain.
That's right.
I went to the oldest public high school in the United States of America, Boston English High School, because Latin was a private prep for Harvard. So Latin is older,
yep,
but English is older in being public. And so in 1964, Wonder Bread and Hostess Cupcake had many plants in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. They
decided to consolidate them in one plant in Natick, Mass, across from the drive-in theater, which is now where Neiman Marcus is.
Huh.
So the funny story is there's a ranch in Natick, nice ranch, $19,500, right?
Okay.
And there's a unfinished expandable cape on Pond Street here in Franklin, $14,500.
Okay. I
didn't think I could afford the difference in the $5,000. Well, you know, today that ranch is probably 700, 500, 600,000
easily, and
mine might be 300,000 if that, right? So quite a difference in money. But one of the reasons I want to point out, 1964, right?
Yeah.
They had a hard time selling this ranch, and me being a newbie and kind of naive,
right?
Right. You know, I love the ranch. I love that type, right? They had a hard time selling it. I bought it, but it was several years that I found out that I realized why the ranch wasn't selling. Because about 4 houses down from me toward the VFW, there was an African-American family.
Really?
In that house, they were school teachers, not in Franklin, somewhere else,
right,
I believe. I think one actually worked for the state.
Yeah.
And so there was, at that time in Franklin, kind of not an open bias,
right,
but a type of bias.
So did you get to know them?
Very periphery. In other words, you know, I met them, we talked,
right,
but I can't say that I knew them as well.
These folks were trailblazers.
They were.
Courageous.
They were. And I could go back and tell you other stuff before I moved to Franklin. But in the Kennedy School, I'd like to begin with the Kennedy School. I can remember, okay, that school was completed, and there was a debate. At that time, they had town meetings. Debate what to name it. Whether to name it after a local educator that was quite famous here in Franklin, or whether to name it after the former president that had passed away.
Right.
And they ended up naming it the Kennedy School. And going back in time, right, some great teacher, right, decided, well, there's no official bug of the state of Massachusetts. she came up with the idea of asking her students, and I think this was the second grade students.
Right.
I think it was 1972, I think. You know, why don't we propose a bug to be named the state bug? Well, they came up with a ladybug.
That's right.
They came up with it. And they went up to the State House and they testified before a government panel.
Right.
And the panel agreed with them, and it was voted that the official state bug would be the ladybug. One of that classmates, I believe, in that class was Jim Valley. Now, tying things together, right?
Yes, yes.
Jim Valley went to Brown University,
Right.
where you attended.
Yes.
At the same time you were there.
That's true.
Because he was a roommate of Kennedy.
Yes.
What was it? Was it John?
John Kennedy Jr. Yes. Yes.
Which was Teddy's son. And not only that, but he actually delivered a message around the library. The library, you're familiar with the story, is considered the first public library, not because of the building,
right,
but because of the selectmen saying the books could be lent out
yes,
to anyone in the town.
The first lending library in the country.
First lending library, okay.
Right. Public lending library.
Public.
Right.
No, it wasn't public at the time.
Yeah.
At the time, it was a private library run by the Library Association, which just about now is disbanding.
Correct.
After all those years.
Yeah, it was just at the last meeting that they had with that regard.
That they had.
Yes.
So staying with the schools for a minute,
right,
okay?
Right.
You may or may not realize that, I guess probably around 2000 or maybe even later, 18% of Franklin is under the age of 18.
It's a lot.
A lot.
That's a big
number. And the raw numbers of students, right, is one of the highest in Massachusetts. So we were a community that always voted and built new schools because we grew. We're equal distance between Boston, Providence, and Worcester. We quickly became a building community in the 70s, 80s, and 90s of people just going wild and building houses and families just moving in.
Right.
And this was a time that people took seriously. It takes a community to build a village. So this town has always supported the building of education, I mean, the buildings that education has been held in.
Sure.
It has always supported having music, arts in Franklin.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, at Dean College in the chapel upstairs.
That's right.
They used to have
across from where my office is.
Across from where your office is. They used to have several nights of individual or group performances by singers, musicians, whatever.
Right.
And it was a perfect place to host that type of event.
I'd love to bring that back.
I would too, because it was outstanding. So the education was really always very important. I forget what year it was that the teachers went out on strike. They were one of the first communities ever to go out on strike for better pay, better working conditions.
Sure.
You know, it was like the bread and roses strike up in Lawrence. You know, we not only want bread in the form of better economic conditions, but we want to be honored and recognized, and we want roses too.
Right, right.
Well, that strike, they sent people to jail. They fined the unions. They fined individuals. It really didn't turn out to be that overwhelmingly in favor of the union. But it was the beginning of teachers kind of saying and bringing light to the problems
Yeah,
that
right,
they felt
right.
were at that time.
Uh-huh.
Franklin High School had an old high school with
Yeah.
a field house.
Right.
Okay. Back in the 80s or the 90s, my last daughter, I think, graduated in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really speak what's happening in a
Couple
current
years
day
ago.
situation.
Right.
Okay. But I can speak that one of the problems then, okay, was alcohol. One of the problems that really both Franklin residents and other people really didn't attack or address too seriously
Right.
was drinking,
Uh-huh.
parties out in the woods,
Sure.
even buying the kegs of beer, even though the kegs had a number on them that you could, if you wrote the person's name down and address down, you
Sure.
could trace back.
Right. Right.
Today I understand that is less of a problem, okay, only because drugs is more of a problem. And there's a great place now in Franklin called Safe Havens that has a wide, great outreach around that whole issue to not only Franklin but many communities. And I hope you've met with them.
We are meeting with a number of folks out there. It's alcohol, drugs, the society is frenzied about it, and how we look at it, how we view it, and unfortunately we tend to give young people really mixed messages about the notions of use of alcohol and the use of drugs, and it's something we've got to get in check a bit. But yeah, we do a lot of things to try and make sure that we're getting people, our students especially, to think about well-being, their total health and well-being. Well, let me switch this a bit. How do you think Franklin is doing now with regard to, you mentioned culture, you mentioned education, people coming together, art. Where do you think we are now with all that?
Well, we certainly have progressed very far down the road. We now have a cultural district. We now have a ladybug trail.
Yes.
We now have the black box for theater performances. For years and years, I used to film the Circle of Friends Coffee House.
Oh, yeah.
Now it's still being filmed and shown on this Access channel.
Right.
And we've always had a strong financial plan for the budget of the town of Franklin. All right. We've always had the school buildings modern built. We've always had recreation facilities.
Yeah.
We would. When I moved to Franklin, I had no idea what soccer was. I knew football and I played baseball, right? But Franklin, being an old Italian community, not only knew soccer, but bocce.
Yes,
and they
right.
used to have bocce courts.
Right.
And there's still a bocce court up at the senior center. So as far as the arts go and as far as the use of the town common, we have farmers market on it now. We still have the 4th of July parade. But my concern now is, okay, when I spent the 70s, 80s, and 90s here in Franklin, we were a village. We had a lot of people that would volunteer to do a little of this, a little of that, in the churches and the communities. But now my concern is any community that begins to have a lot of wealth. There are a lot of big homes, a lot of wealthy homes, a lot of more expensive homes. The first thing that happens in those communities, and I think is happening in Franklin, is money. They're more interested in and maybe they have to work harder and longer to earn that wealth, to pay for the housing, to pay for other things. And they have less time and interest in volunteering.
So you see disconnections here.
I do. I see that, a community, if it isn't going to be addressing all the problems,
Right.
and maybe not all the problems, but if
Sure.
it isn't acting together and being interested enough to look into seeing what's happening in their community,
Yeah.
is a community that is going has the possibility
Right.
of being a little dysfunctional. Let me point out what politicians, local politicians, your local politicians, right, have the most economic influence of how your taxes are going to be spent and how high your taxes are going to go.
Sure.
And yet, what, 10% of the voters might go out to the polls to vote for people? And probably the assessors in any town have the greatest influence on over what your property is worth.
Right.
And how many times are you looking at how you're being assessed, or whether the assessments are on track? Your town council is going to be governing how your relationships,
Right.
economically and socially, and how dense your planning board, how dense, where the New England Chapel is now, across the, not across the street, but right in front of them, they're building this housing thing. That is going to be the future slum of Franklin in 60 or 70 years.
Wow.
I grew up at 300 Hyde Park Avenue.
Right.
Tenement buildings,
Right.
5 or 6 of them that had 100 people.
Right.
Across the street on Washington Street, going up, they had housing for the poor, housing for low income, right?
Sure.
Huge tenement buildings. Those buildings in Boston became problems with gangs. They became problems being run down.
Yeah.
The buildings that I see going up now, right, are so many houses. We're regressing that after the newness wears out on those buildings.
Yeah.
After they've been lived in for 20 or 30 years and they become a little shoddy, right? Those buildings, I think, could become slum and low areas.
Right.
Franklin has to, by state law, apparently become more dense in its buildings. And
especially around
space,
MBTA spaces, that kind of thing.
That kind of thing, right.
So what do you think needs to happen to get people more engaged?
Well, I go back to you.
Yeah.
I hope that's where education, that's where the college is, that's where Dean is setting an example of how to be an inclusive community. And I think you need to go back and contribute to the community that you live in some ways.
Yeah.
Now, some of those ways may be on committees.
Right.
Some of those ways may be just volunteering for fish to help people drive to doctor's appointments.
Sure, sure.
You know, I'm not saying you devote your life and a whole lot of time, but devoting to church,
right.
You know, one of the things that greatly upset me that I think is a trend that is going to happen.
Okay.
Is they passed the Storm Water Drain Act.
Sure.
Okay. That now you're going to be charged for impervious surfaces. Well, they began with the water in the sewer. They took that out of the real estate budget and set up separate accounts for that. And now you're charged separately. Why? Because they are limited on how much money they can raise through real estate taxes. Now they're moving another charge, which is the charge for the impervious surfaces. And what they've done on that charge is very upsetting to me, because they're charging religious organizations, they're charging hospitals, and they're charging Dean College.
Yes.
No, they're charging nonprofits, they're charging places of worship.
All right.
And to me, that is a move absolutely in the wrong direction. And the single-family homes that are going to benefit from this, right?
Yeah.
The benefit, I believe, is so negligible to the individual compared with the impact on who they're charging.
Right.
Is so great.
So, what do you say to the person who says, well, these nonprofits and institutions should pay their fair share? They're here because we all contribute to their well-being. They've got to give something back, and especially where environmental concerns are at bay. I mean, what about that? And by the way, I know, I feel it, but, you know, there is an argument for us kicking in our fair share.
Well, that's why they're called nonprofits. That's why they're called hospitals. That's why there's an exceptions in the law about tax breaks, and religious organizations are providing a spiritual and a social consciousness that communities need.
Right.
And you're helping them go out of business.
Right.
Or you're helping, you know, you're complaining about college costs, you're complaining about medical costs, right? And what are you doing? You're raising that cost,
right.
Okay? And I really only see, if you believe in that argument, then you're going to go all the way, and you're going to have state and federal taxes on those organizations. There's not going to be any real distinction if you carry that argument to its conclusion.
Sure. Well, and it's also part of my goal, and it sounds like yours too, is to make sure that people see these other ways that we contribute significantly to the community, to the society, and that we do a lot of work, especially in religious and faith-based communities, to do real social work, to do real caretaking work of a lot of individuals. And my work is primarily with undergraduate students, but also in some cases with employees and others. So I hear you. Now, I've seen you at interfaith council meetings and out in this space. Talk to me a little bit about your work there, Frank, and tell me a little bit more about the historic communities that are here in Franklin as well.
Well, I'm going to talk about a little something different.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to talk about Frank Falvey's religious upbringing.
Okay.
And beliefs. Okay.
Go with it.
My father was Roman Catholic. My mother was Protestant.
Okay.
Back in a day that they were married.
Right.
Okay. That was, my father was Irish, my mother was Yankee. That was a no-no. That was a sin. That was not acceptable. My father had at a very young age decided that he didn't really believe in all the Roman Catholic stuff that went on.
Sure.
I was brought up a United Methodist.
You were?
So
your parents did that, or did you do that yourself?
Someone came to the door, talked to my mother. My father had no objection.
Right.
And I was brought up in a local United Methodist congregation.
I see.
Became very active as a teenager. I mean, I was president of two groups, the Jamaica Plain Interfaith Teenage Group and the United Methodist Youth Group.
Right.
Went to Purdue University in 1959. A national meeting of the United Methodist Youth. There I met Odetta. She performance blew me absolutely away. I became immediately an Odetta fan. Dave Brubeck in Take 5. Jazz, just fell in love and met Eleanor Roosevelt, who gave a speech, but after the speech, you could go and ask a question. She was so impressive that it was unbelievable. At the time, the Suez Canal was being blocked by ships that were sunken.
Yeah.
She said a simple word, oil. It's all about oil. So I have always been, Franklin, when we moved to Franklin in 1964,
Right.
became active in the United Methodist Church here, had different positions in the church, and was one of the founding members of the of the ecumenical, which was at that time Christian
Right.
organization, and was one of the founding signers of that document.
Tell me more. Why'd you all decide to do that, especially during that time? It was a tough time to do something like that.
Well, I think the churches, the Christian churches came together because they felt the need to be united on certain issues or certain acts and to be coordinated in what they were doing in publicizing.
Like what, for example?
Well, they founded, and people will never realize this, they founded the Franklin Food Bank.
I see.
The Franklin Food Bank first ran and was under the auspices of the ecumenical, or maybe at that time it was Interfaith Council, because when the Jewish synagogue came to Franklin, they automatically, in a sense, reformed to an interfaith council.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're still involved?
After a number of years of absence, yeah, I read. The council is made up of the pastors of the churches and a lay member.
I see.
And so I became again involved as a lay member. And so the churches, again, in coordination in mainly help. They raise money for a heating.
Yes.
For the heating oil. They conduct Thanksgiving and other services, on a joint basis. And at times they issue joint statements on different issues. But continuing, I became aware back in the around 1984 that I knew nothing about my Roman Catholic side. I knew nothing about Roman Catholicism, and so went to the Benedictine Abbey to a Irish Celtic spirituality conference, and for a number of years became very involved in that Celtic and went on a number of not vacations, but religious pilgrimages.
Oh, wow.
I've been to Ireland twice on religious pilgrimages. I've been to Scotland. I've been to England. I have seen the founders John Wesley's home. And I went on a religious pilgrimage that began in Jordan.
Okay.
And then went to Israel and ended up in Egypt.
Wow.
Which was a very eye-opening experience.
When I first met you, and you told me that you came here in 1964, I said, wow, you are a local. And you said, no, I'm not. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
I'm a city boy.
Okay.
I grew up in the city.
Right, so did I.
I did spend a lot of my summers when I was young in Hudson, Massachusetts, where my grandmother on my mother's side lived.
Okay.
Okay. So I spent a lot of my summers there. But why am I a city boy?
Yeah.
I lived on Hyde Park Avenue in the basement, three-room basement of a huge, huge apartment building.
Right.
Right. The streetcars went by. I could hear the streetcars all the time.
Right.
You know, I even though somewhat I was on a main street, in back of me was a residential area.
Okay.
You know, I played stickball at the school.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, I went to church where you walk to church.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to English high school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was it about English high school that was so special?
Yeah.
It was a central school that you had to apply to go to and would be accepted. And if you didn't behave, no problem. They just sent you back to the district school.
I see.
So at this school, who's at this school?
Uh-huh.
Roman Catholics,
Mm-hmm.
outnumbered. I mean, we're significant number. Jewish boys, significant number.
Uh-huh.
There were a few WASP like me, okay, minority, okay. It was all men, all boys, all men.
Mm-hmm.
You had military drill, okay.
Really?
You had ethnic diversity.
Mm-hmm.
I would say probably maybe 20% was African American.
Mm-hmm.
You had some people from China. You had some people from the Chinese area in Boston.
Right.
You had Italians. You had Irish. You had people from Brighton.
Mm-hmm.
You had Middle Eastern, of Middle Eastern descent.
Mm-hmm.
It was a place, right, where no one had a majority.
Mm-hmm.
No one could control things.
A lot of voices there.
A lot of voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned early, particularly in my career in business,
Right.
diversity
Mm-hmm.
is the best thing to ever happen.
Yeah.
Diversity is great. When I was in charge in the baking industry of the administration, the office,
Sure.
I put women in men's jobs. I put age. I had a payroll clerk in one place that was about 74 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
When I got there, and she said, "Are you going to fire me?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "As long as you can do the job,
Right.
I'm not going to fire you."
Yeah.
I was the first person for Wonder Bread in this baking company in the office that hired minorities.
Mm.
And for me, that was such a great honor and a great ability. And to mix up,
Yeah.
I always look for a person to fill the job that they were best suited for.
Sure.
I had a former priest come and wanted one of the jobs in the office. He had decided that the priesthood wasn't meant for him.
Mm-hmm.
Highly qualified, highly able to do the job.
Yeah.
Not a good fit.
Ah.
Not a good fit because he was suited for a better position. He was qualified for a better opportunity. He was not going to fit, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And where a lot of Roman Catholic women were there, and he's no longer a priest.
So a little bit more on who you are. We did say off camera. Let's talk a little bit about some recommendations for me. What are you reading that you think I should and other people who are watching should take a look at? Or what are you watching or listening to?
I'm going back, not to the present.
Okay.
I'm going back to recommend things that I think are lasting.
Go for it.
If you're in a religious vein or event, there's a person called John O'Donohue, who was a former Roman Catholic priest, wrote on Celtic spirituality, was an academic. He did his PhD on Hegel in Germany, but could write in simple, ordinary language.
Right.
And there's one word that if you read them, you come across a lot, lovely.
Lovely.
He
uses that.
He uses this word, lovely.
Lovely.
Now, what do I want you to read?
Yes.
I want you to read a book called Blessings.
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 Mm-hmm.
He's a poet, and blessings is such a great way of living.
Yeah.
To bless things.
Yeah.
He wrote an outstanding book, only if you're a spiritual seeker and
Right.
seeking spirituality, called An Alma Cara.
Okay.
What is an Alma Cara? It's a soul friend. It's a friend that you and he spiritually are on the same track. He's a teacher, and a soul friend is a friend that, on a spiritual basis, you know, you're coming to.
Yeah.
Okay. Very important book.
Got it.
Short story. I don't know if you're familiar. You're probably familiar with Albert Camus.
Oh,
wrote The
of course,
Stranger,
of course.
Existentialism.
Yes.
Wrote a 4-page short story called The Winds of Jamila.
Okay. Talk to me about
I came to that in a freshman at West Virginia Wesleyan College.
that. Okay.
And in a freshman literature book, okay. And it's visiting a deserted place in, say, Morocco,
Okay.
ancient city.
Right, right,
No one lives there anymore.
right.
It's desolate. The trip is only to go there and to come back.
Mm-hmm.
The description
Uh-huh.
of the scenery,
Uh-huh.
the description of what happened is outstanding. And the feeling that you come back with is all is nothing.
Wow.
All is nothing. But,
Wow.
you know, you got to weigh.
Camus.
That's a piece of literature that you critically got to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
You critically got to, at least for me,
Yeah.
play in my.
Wow.
What place do I have that?
I'm going to take a look at that.
Very, very influential.
Right.
I can't think of a specific economic book
Uh-huh.
or a book specifically on common sense. But you need to read about basic economics, particularly around you.
Yep.
You know,
It's useful.
I had a professor, right, that taught economics.
Mm-hmm.
And on his exam, right,
Uh-huh.
he would ask, what is the influence of a snowstorm?
Mm.
Is it inflationary?
Mm-hmm.
Is it deflationary?
Mm.
What is the influence now on your cell phone that you can be at a restaurant with a friend and you want to help pay the bill, right?
Yeah.
You can go to your cell phone, he can give you his account number,
Right.
and you can transfer money.
Right.
Is that a good idea?
Depends.
You know, when you pay cash, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're kind of controlling how
Mhm.
much you have to spend.
Mm-hmm.
The use of doing stuff like that, are people really in their mind,
Mm-hmm.
or in a couple of months are they going to realize, well, I'm $3,000 in debt?
You know, a good writer for a little bit of common sense and philosophy, Martha Nussbaum, if you haven't read her, a great philosopher. I like what she writes. I like how plain it can be and how provocative she is, but also how much she makes sense. What about listening? Do you listen to music a lot? What are you listening to?
Yeah.
Well, give me a recommendation or two there.
Well, I just heard Diane Blue at the Black Box.
Diane Blue.
I just bought her CD.
Yeah.
I'm listening to Jerry Lee Lewis.
No, by the way, tell people a little bit more about Diane Blue. Who is she? What kind of stuff does she do?
She does.
Or how she make you feel?
Blues. She does blues, soul music. Instrumentally, she had a bassist, a guitarist, a drummer,
Right.
and a keyboard player.
Yeah.
Instrumentally, they were outstanding.
Right.
She writes her own music. She
Yeah.
writes her own soul songs, blues songs.
Got it.
And they were good. The show upcoming is James Montgomery. He
James
will have
Montgomery.
played by the time you see the show.
Uh-huh.
James plays a harmonica. So
Now, you also mentioned Jerry Lee Lewis,
Jerry Lee Lewis, I didn't realize
who recently passed away, right?
that he passed away.
Yeah.
Great Balls of Fire,
Right.
Rockabilly Piano,
Yeah.
The Man of My Day. And apparently at the Star Cafe in Hamburg, Germany, right, he recorded this wild, and it's called the best performance maybe ever
Really?
by a singer.
Really?
It is absolutely wild.
So worth listening to.
Oh.
What makes it wild? Tell me more about
He's
that.
just wild on it.
For people who don't know, he would bang.
And it's an unbelievably wild show. Harlem, the Renaissance, the Harlem Blues Festival that was never televised back in the soundtrack.
Oh, sure.
The soundtrack to that
Yeah.
is, yeah. I listened.
This is that show that that movie documentary that Questlove put out.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I probably have, I don't know, between CDs and albums, probably over 3,000.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I gather you must have a collection.
I do have quite a collection. I used to work for a radio station, so I'd listen to a lot of music then, and I still listen to quite a bit now. And yes, I do. In fact, I just gifted to a friend for his birthday. He likes Whitney Houston, and I said to him, I'm going to give you Whitney Houston's first album because I have it. And sure enough, I went to my stacks and I found it and pulled it out and gave it to him for his birthday. He was floored that I still had these kinds of things. So I do have quite a collection, cassettes, albums, and less so CDs, mostly albums, just because that's what I start to really put my hands on quite a bit.
Deja Vu in Natick. If you ever want to look for used albums,
really
inexpensive, usually very good quality.
Right.
If you're familiar with Folkways, a lot of times they have Folkways albums there.
Well, you know what I love about albums? The art. You know, remember these things have art and photographs that are fantastic. Of course, it's also the process. Now, many people may not have had a chance to do this, but we have, of picking it up. They put it in a nice brown bag for you. You'd get it to where you need it to be. And usually with me, I was with other people, and then you pierce the plastic on it. You take it out. You'd admire, first off, the liner notes. Remember that, right?
Oh,
liner
absolutely.
notes. You'd read those sorts of things. Albums then came with these little side notes that were written by someone, often the artist, but the liner notes were so important. And then you put that thing on with the greatest of care and sound. It's great.
Absolutely.
And then you'd have to care for that album like it was a baby.
And if you
it was delicate.
If you bought it at a performance,
yes.
I always had Odetta sign it and date it.
You did.
Artist. I mean, I bought a CD from Diana Blue. I had her sign it and date it. It's just precious.
Now look, I also love the sounds that I can get streaming too. Don't get me wrong. It's a good way for me to, my ear to pick up things and to get more, but the experience is very different from that standpoint. So what about watching? Are you watching anything that you would recommend for me to take a look at?
No, not, no. No, I would say, no.
Well, I'm rewatching The Wire. Have you ever seen The Wire?
No.
It is a wonderful show. It's old now. It's more than I think 20 years old, but a really incredible look at the city of Baltimore. And over the 5 seasons that it aired, it's looking at police, communities, drug trade, docks, loading docks, newspapers, school systems, a bit of corruption, but also those glimmers of hope in all these spaces too. So it's a really wonderful bit of writing, and I think it sets a standard for so many other things. The other one I'm going to recommend if you get a chance, Only Murders in the Building. Steve Martin stars in it, Martin Short, Selena Gomez, and it's a show about true crime shows and these people who try to solve them. And it is just funny and beautiful, wonderful sort of thing.
Well, I can speak about movies.
Yeah, tell me a movie that you think we should see.
The last movie I just saw was the other day.
Oh, yeah?
80 Brady. 80 Brady, about Tom Brady, and the 2017.
That's out already? 80 Brady, huh?
And it was shown Saturday, and it may have only been in the theaters that Saturday.
Oh, how
but 80
was
Brady
it?
With Sally Fields,
Lily
Jane
Tomlin,
Fonda, Lil Thomason, and Rita from Morano from West Side Story.
Oh, yeah, Rita Moreno, yes.
Moreno from West Side Story.
How is it?
Great, funny,
Is that
funny,
right?
about life. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
Before I saw that movie, in the morning I saw The Whale.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Don't.
Oh, really?
Don't.
What?
Depressing.
Oh,
depressing.
Right? Yeah.
Sad. Not understandable.
Really?
I mean, confusing.
Wow.
I regret that the negative influence of that movie on me.
Wow.
Maybe it's me. It's going to take me a long time to get rid of. I think it's why this movie is even nominated.
Wow.
I have,
Jeez,
no
Frank,
idea.
I'm going to put you in the undecided column there. Oh my gosh! But 80 for Brady.
Oh.
Can you love that if you're not a Patriots fan?
Absolutely.
You can.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Got
mean, it doesn't have as much to do specifically with the team as it has to do with people adopting a team and being, being absorbed by a team and lifting someone up, maybe higher than they should be, but lifting them up and then inspiring.
Yeah.
It was an inspiring movie, I thought. So I've seen a lot of movies,
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And during COVID, right?
Yeah.
Movies were the place to go. Me and the person that went with me might have been 2 of 6 people
in the whole theater. Yeah, well, that's the thing, is whether or not theaters, what do we do with them? Where do we go with them overall?
Right.
So, yeah. Well, any final thoughts before we take a break?
Well, what I want to come back to Franklin is, and I apologize for diverging so much.
This is a riff, and it's called riffing, right? Riffing. We go back and forth with these things.
Is that Franklin, everyone recognizes it's a great community.
Okay.
And that's why they're moving here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're coming here. That's why housing is still going down. Because we're still involved, a lot of people are still involved in being a community. Academically, at least when my daughters were going to school, the system was absolutely outstanding.
Right.
I think overall the town government and the concern of the manager and the concern of the town council is very moving. And you have here in Franklin, you have restaurants, you have parks, you have a senior center.
Yeah.
You have places of performances. Right. You have a college.
Yeah.
You have so much happening in Franklin. The more that I'm so sad the Chaya bookstore went out of business because the owner died. I'm so sad that used bookstores are fading. Where are you going to be able to go and browse in a record store or a bookstore? But I think Franklin, all my years, I worked in Lynn, Mass, New Bedford, Mass, Worcester, Mass, all for the same company or companies, Natick, Mass, and decided I'll commute. I will commute
from here.
From here.
Wow.
Okay, because this is the place that is best for my family and a great place to go.
How
grow
wonderful. Wow.
Up. So
That says it all, Frank. Thank you for
thank
joining
you.
us.
I appreciate it.
This is Riffing with the President. I'm Ken Elmore, the president of Dean College, and I've been joined today by Frank Falvey, and he has given us a wonderful, wonderful riff on Franklin, on life, and how we all continue to move forward. It's exciting doing that. I hope you'll join me in my next riff and get together with some other folks, both around Dean College and most certainly around the town of Franklin.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.